There are some accidents that end at the scene, and then there are the ones that keep killing people long after the road has been washed clean. A college kid offers a crying little girl a piece of candy at a crosswalk. A second later, a truck wipes out the girl and her mother. At the funeral, the girl's brother looks at him like he should have died instead. And after that, everything starts to slide. Black envelopes, a dead stare in restaurant glass, a knife outside his apartment, dreams where he's the one doing the killing. And the worst part is this. By the end, he can't even tell whether he's being hunted by a grieving brother, or slowly turning into something just as bad. This one showed up on Japan's old 2-channel boards back in March of 2007. People still drag this story back up today, 'cause it never feels like a ghost story. It feels like a man losing the fight to stay human. The thread was titled, "A Murderer's Story," and once you hear the whole thing, you'll get why that title stuck. Back then, the guy telling it was a university student. Before that, he'd pushed his way through one of those correspondence high schools, the kind where you're mostly on your own and mostly trying not to fall behind. Somehow, he made it into a national university. After that, his life looked normal enough. Classes, part-time work, cheap meals, drinks with friends when he had the money, a tiny apartment, a lot of laundry, a lot of instant food, the usual little routines that make you feel like your life is finally starting. Nothing about him sounded dramatic. That matters, because stories like this hit harder when they start in a life that sounds ordinary. Then one gray, cold day, he was on his way to work when he stopped at a red light, and that was it. That was the point where his life split into before and after. Beside him was a young mother, maybe in her late 20s, and a little girl around first grade age. The girl had dropped her ice cream on the pavement and was crying hard. Not the fake kind, the real kind. Loud, choking, stubborn. The mother kept trying to calm her down, saying she'd buy her another one as soon as they crossed. But the girl wanted one right then. Right now. That exact one, even though it was already melting into the road. The narrator remembered he still had some candy in his pocket from a barbecue place he'd been to earlier. So when the light changed, he crouched down so he was eye level with the girl and held it out. Something like, "Here, it won't replace the ice cream, but don't make your mom's day any harder, okay?" The mother smiled and thanked him. The girl stopped crying. Just like that. She gave him a tiny, wet-eyed smile and reached for the candy. And right there, right in front of him, the mother and daughter were suddenly gone. Not faded, not blurred. Gone. The only thing left in front of him was a truck. After that, his memory broke. Not all at once. More like part of the moment had been ripped out, and the part that stayed didn't fit together properly anymore. When his thoughts started coming back, he was already sitting in a police car. A broad-shouldered officer was beside him, explaining what had happened in that careful voice people use when they think you might either pass out or break apart in front of them. A drunk truck driver had torn through the intersection. The mother and daughter who had just been standing next to him had died on the spot. He said that was the first time death had ever felt physically close to him. Not like a story. Not like hearing that somebody far away had passed. He meant close enough that his body stopped feeling like his. His hands shook. His legs shook. He couldn't tell whether he was cold, sick, or just empty. The officer asked him to say whatever he could remember. Anything. No matter how small. So, he admitted it. He had stopped them. He had handed the girl the candy. He had delayed them. The cop told him the blame belonged to the drunk driver. That was true. It just didn't matter. Because once that thought got into him, it rooted there fast. If I hadn't stopped them, if I hadn't reached into my pocket, if I hadn't made the girl smile, if I had just minded my own business, maybe they would have crossed a few seconds earlier. Maybe the truck would have missed them. Maybe they'd still be alive. He went home late that night, showered until the water ran cold, forced down a little bread because he knew he had to eat something, then lay there in bed staring up at the dark, feeling like he had brought something filthy home on his skin. By the next morning, all he could think about was the funeral. Should he go? Should he stay away? Should he tell the family what really happened? Should he tell them about the candy? One of the officers had hinted that maybe he shouldn't, not because the truth didn't matter, because grief always wants a target, and the driver was already dead. That meant the family still needed somewhere to put their anger. On the way to the funeral, he kept trying to talk himself down. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know I was just trying to help a crying kid. The driver was the one who killed them. But the more he repeated those words, the worse he felt. Like he was forcing lies into his own mouth and making himself swallow them. By the time he got there, he was already sick of himself. He stood in front of the mother and daughter's photos, pressed his hands together, tried to pray. And even then, a part of his mind was still whispering the ugliest possible thing. I didn't do this. I didn't take them. The second that thought crossed his mind, he hated himself for it. Because what kind of person stands at a funeral and immediately starts building a defense inside his own head? He wanted to leave as fast as possible. He almost did. Then the girl's father stopped him. The man looked hollowed out, like he had aged years in a matter of days. But he was polite, careful, almost painfully calm, and that made it worse. If the man had screamed at him, maybe the narrator would have understood what to do with that. This was harder. He asked whether the narrator had been nearby when the accident happened. Then he asked the question that really got under his skin. If you remember anything, please tell me. Anything. Even something small. Were they smiling? Were they crying? I just want to know. The narrator had planned to keep the candy part buried. Buried and never spoken aloud again. Forever. But looking at that father, he couldn't. So he told him everything. About the dropped ice cream. About the crying. About the candy. About the way the little girl smiled right before she reached for it. And the father's response wasn't rage. It was relief. So she was smiling. That's good. If she wasn't crying, that's enough. Thank you. He kept thanking him, and that should have made the narrator feel lighter. It didn't. Because there was someone else in the room. The girl's older brother, Kenji. Kenji had spent most of the funeral with his head down. Quiet, still, barely there. He looked like somebody who had gone completely numb. But once the story was out, once the narrator had finished talking, Kenji lifted his head and stared straight at him. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just looked at him with a kind of hatred that wiped out whatever comfort the father had just given. Not loud hatred. Not wild hatred. That would have been easier. This was colder than that. The kind that feels settled. Like he'd already decided what the narrator was. On the way out, Kenji muttered something under his breath. The narrator couldn't make out every word, but it sounded close enough to this. Why did my mother and sister die while that guy got to live? It should have been him. That night he dreamed he was running through some place he didn't recognize. No landmarks, no reason, no idea what was behind him. He only knew one thing. If he stopped, it would catch him. He woke up drenched in sweat, heart slamming, mouth dry, still feeling that blind need to move. Soon after that, he met his girlfriend for lunch. The first thing she said when she saw him was that he looked like a dead man that morning. That was her wording. Not tired, not pale. A dead man. He laughed it off. He didn't tell her about the accident, didn't tell her about the funeral, didn't tell her about Kenji. And for a little while, sitting there with her, talking about class and ordinary things, he almost felt normal again. Almost. Then she got up to use the bathroom. He was sitting there, looking through the glass, when he caught the restaurant reflected in it. Kenji was standing there, watching him. Same dead eyes as the funeral. It wasn't even just the sight of him. It was how still he was. Like he'd been standing there the whole time. Like the narrator had only just noticed what had already been in the room. After lunch, he drove his girlfriend home and stayed there until dark. He wasn't ready to go back to his apartment, but eventually he had to. He lived on the 5th floor of a 7-story building. Usually he took the stairs, slowly, quietly. Not because he was scared of anything, just habit. He liked telling himself it counted as exercise. That night, climbing between the 4th and 5th floors, he saw a silhouette standing in front of his apartment door. Moonlight hit the figure. It was Kenji. He tried to move. His legs wouldn't cooperate. Not metaphorically. They really wouldn't. Like the signal from his brain wasn't making it down far enough. So he crouched and hid himself by the wall leading back to the 4th floor. Kenji didn't see him. Or if he did, he gave nothing away. Instead, Kenji pressed the elevator button. The narrator's heart was pounding so hard he thought the sound alone would give him away. The elevator came. A soft chime. The doors opened, then closed, then started back down. And right then, just for a second, he felt like Kenji had looked straight at him before leaving. That was where it really started. Not the funeral, not the dream. That. The moment he understood this thing was going to follow him home. After that came the dreams. In one, he was beating Kenji with a metal bat over and over until his hands felt slick. In another, he was running again. Same panic, same thing behind him. Same certainty that if he stopped moving, he was finished. He stopped sleeping properly. He stopped wanting to go home. He started arranging his life around not being alone, getting friends to pick him up, finding excuses to stay out longer, spending nights at other people's places if he could. That kind of life hollows you out fast. Then, one morning at around 4, he found a black envelope by his front door. Inside were white pages with typed words. No handwriting, no hesitation, just typed lines. The writer kept calling him murderer, kept saying he was knocking on the murderer's door, kept asking why he wouldn't come out. Then came the part that stayed with him. Come out. If you come out, you'll be happy. I'll be happy. Mother will be happy. My little sister will be happy. Father will be happy. Everyone will be happy. His hands were so wet the paper started to tear. He crumpled the letter and threw it away. Then came the next thought. What if Kenji crawled right back out of it? So he burned it in the kitchen and watched until it was gone. That should have helped. It didn't. More envelopes came. Black ones. White ones. Always typed, always wrong. Sometimes pleading, sometimes celebratory. Sometimes so calm they felt worse than the angry ones. And it got worse. He went to the police. They treated it like a prank. Worse than that. Like he was some lonely kid making up drama to get attention. One of them even suggested he'd be better off doing volunteer work if he needed human contact that badly. That was when something inside him took another step in the wrong direction. He hung up, stood in the kitchen, and found himself staring at the knives. Not just staring, thinking, maybe I should kill him first. That thought scared him more than Kenji did, because it didn't feel wild. It felt practical. It felt calm. And that was much worse. He went out and bought pepper spray, an alarm tape, emergency food, planks, a self-defense manual, anything that made it feel like he still had some control. He checked locks, boarded things up, tried to turn his apartment into a little sealed box where nothing could reach him. But while he was busy hardening the outside, something uglier was happening inside. He started looking in mirrors and feeling like the face staring back wasn't his. Not changed exactly. Not distorted. Just not his. Like the expression belonged to someone colder. Someone who had already crossed a line and was waiting for the rest of him to catch up. One day at school, he opened his bag and found the kitchen knife inside. He had no memory of putting it there. None. He just stared at it. Zipped the bag back up. And sat there feeling the blood leave his face. After that, the feeling came more often, like someone else was starting to move around inside his body. Then Kenji came for him again. One night he saw him outside the apartment, smiling beside the shadow of the vending machine where he'd been hiding. This time, Kenji was carrying a knife and a backpack. Not a threat anymore. A plan. The narrator bolted for the elevator, got inside just before Kenji reached him, and rode it up to the 5th floor. By the time he got to his door, he was shaking so badly he dropped his keys. When he finally got inside and slammed the door shut, something hit the other side hard. A real impact. Heavy enough that he knew it hadn't been in his head. He locked everything he could and hid in the bathroom for 3 hours. Not because he had a plan. Because it was the only room that felt small enough to survive in. When he finally came out, there was another black envelope. This one said Kenji had dreamed of his mother and little sister. They wanted the murderer to be made happy. He called the police again. Same result. Dismissive. Useless. After that, his mind really started to slide. He'd think about escape, then murder, then suicide, then nothing. Then the knife again. After a while, he couldn't tell which thoughts were still his. Eventually, he was stabbed at a train station. He woke up in a hospital bed and immediately knew who had done it. But this was the strange part. He didn't want Kenji caught. Not really. Part of him wanted the whole thing to keep going until he could finish it with his own hands. That thought sat in him like poison. And the worst part was how honest it felt. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When he got out, the letters were still coming. A white envelope with a single congratulatory character on it. A black one saying happiness still hadn't arrived yet, like someone was keeping score. His girlfriend stayed with him through all of it. She found him stabbing his own bed, so far gone he had slashed his own hand without noticing. She cleared out anything that looked like a weapon, walked with him when he went outside, kept an eye on him the way you watch someone who's not safe to leave alone. For a little while, he thought maybe that would be enough. Maybe if somebody stayed close enough, whatever was happening would lose its grip. Then, one night, on a pedestrian bridge, Kenji came back. This time he didn't lurk. He attacked. The knife went into the narrator's shoulder, and the first thing he felt wasn't pain. It was recognition. Like the murderer inside him had finally sat up. He pulled the knife back out of his own shoulder, grabbed Kenji by the throat, started thinking about where to stab him first. Not whether, where. It felt like some terrible part of him had finally gotten its chance. Like all that fear, all those dreams, all those letters had been pushing him toward this exact second. If his girlfriend hadn't thrown herself onto him and clung to him with everything she had, Kenji probably would have died there by his hand. But Kenji died anyway. There was a struggle. A wall. The bridge. Traffic below. Afterward, he could never say with certainty whether he had pushed Kenji, whether Kenji slipped, or whether something worse had happened in the stretch where his memory went black. What he knew for sure was this. Blood on the road below, and Kenji was gone. He was questioned in the hospital after that. The police told him it would probably be treated as self-defense. There were witnesses. He shouldn't worry. That only made him feel colder. Because the question that mattered wasn't whether the law would excuse him. The question was whether he had done it. Really done it. Not physically. He visited Kenji's father afterward, half expecting the man to blame him. Part of him may even have wanted that. Instead, the father apologized. Over and over. Said if punishment was needed, he would accept any of it. It was wrong enough to leave him numb. Like every natural response had been scraped out of him one by one. He also visited his girlfriend in the hospital. She was asleep. When he thanked her and turned to go, he felt her hand catch his for just a second. In that instant, he realized something simple and ugly. He still wanted to live. Months passed. On the dead girl's memorial day, he visited the father's house again. That night he dreamed of a hill covered in flowers. He saw the whole family there together. The little girl, Sakuya, smiling, her hand warm in his. Everyone smiling. For the first time in a long time, the dream didn't feel like punishment. For a little while, he let himself believe it was finally over. Then he got home and found a message waiting for him. His girlfriend had been in a car accident. By the time he reached the hospital, surgery was already over. They wheeled her out on a stretcher. She was alive, but one of her legs was gone. And that was when all the old thoughts came back in a different shape. Because if this thing could keep reaching past the dead, past the letters, past Kenji, and into the life of the one person still trying to save him, then what exactly had been stalking him all this time? Kenji? Grief? Guilt? Something born from all three? He went into the bathroom after that and washed his face. Then he looked up at the mirror and heard it. "Morning, murderer." That's the part people don't let go of. Not just that Kenji kept coming. Not just that the letters never really stopped. Not even that his girlfriend paid for a crime she had nothing to do with. It's the way the whole story slowly blurs the line between being hunted by grief and becoming the thing grief wanted him to become. Maybe Kenji was haunting him. Maybe guilt was. Maybe both. Either way, by the end of it, he wasn't scared of dying anymore. He was scared that the murderer in the title was no longer just the boy outside his door. I'm Mr. Greencap. Sleep tight, if you still can. See you next time.